Let's get back to those polls we spoke about at the top of the hour. We gave you that real clear politics average showing Mrs. Clinton with a 3-point lead in a two-way race. One of the polls in that average is a new ABC News Washington Post poll showing a 5-point lead over Donald Trump, 46% to 41%, with the Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson at 9% and Green Party candidate Dr. Jill Stein at just about 2%. Another important number to look at in that poll is President Obama's approval rating, which is at 58%. That is his highest since the early days of his presidency, and that has often been an indicator of how a president's party, a nominee, in this case, of course, Hillary Clinton, will do in the election. For some thoughts on this, let's turn to Scott Jennings, who did political analysis in the White House for President George W. Bush. Hi, Scott.
Hey, Brit. Good to see you.
So, looking at those numbers tonight, which are not terribly different from those we talked about last week, does anything leap out at you?
Yeah, a couple of things. Number one, and you mentioned it, Barack Obama's approval rating. That's a little bit higher than what we've seen in some other surveys. His average is usually in the 49 to 51 range. But you can see when he goes up, she goes up because the lead she has in that survey is wider than her real clear average. So it strikes me that her fortunes may be tied to Barack Obama, and it makes me wonder if we're going to see him a lot more on the campaign trail. If he goes up and she goes up, then it would be smart for them to have her out there, even as the country will tell you that a vast majority of folks will tell you we're on the wrong track. When you look in the state-by-state numbers too, Britt, you see that in the places where she's not doing as well, his approval rating is also down. And so, with the health scare going on and with her image ratings and honesty ratings down, Barack Obama may be the best bet she has to try to put this thing away.
Well, if that 58 number is real, and of course it is out of line with other polls, is it fair to say that it would almost be hard for her to lose the election, since that's been such an indicator in the past?
Yeah, I think if he were to somehow be really and truly at 58%, it would make it really difficult for Donald Trump. I think it is important to know, though, that that was among all adults, which the adult population in the United States is a lot different than the likely voter screen. So my guess is his job approval is less among likely voters.
Yeah, let me stop you right there to explain that to people, because you read polls, some of them are all adults, some of them are registered voters, some are likely voters. What's the difference?
Well, among all adults, people who may or may not be interested in voting, they can have one opinion, but only the likely voters really matter. And among likely voters, Republicans tend to do better, and Donald Trump has done better in surveys where we factor in likely voters. This also matters a lot because the enthusiasm gap in these polls is real. You see that his supporters are a lot more motivated and interested in the election than Hillary Clinton supporters, making them more likely to vote. So I think when you're looking at polling averages, it's really important to look at the screen. Are they just adults? Are they registered? Or are they likely? And likely voters matter a lot. And you can see in the real clear average nationally, her likely voter lead is just 2 points. So we can see huge differences in these numbers based on who you ask.
Yeah, is it a little soon in usually we begin to see likely voter screens around the last few weeks of the election, where they ask people the questions that determine how likely they are to vote, and then they break those out. Does it seem to you a little premature, or do you think these likely voter numbers are pretty good?
I think likely voters right now are very engaged in the election. I don't think there's too many folks sitting around out there wondering, how interested they are in the election. We see high voter interest. I've seen some surveys privately in several states where voter interest today is higher than it was in 2012 when I worked for Mitt Romney in Ohio. So I do think we have a high engagement among people. I don't think we have a lot of folks who are waiting till October the 15th to tune in. Folks are tuned in right now. That's why the health issue is so important, because it's happening inside of a critical window. And we've seen the Clinton campaign, but when their ability to turn a light breeze into a hurricane in about 90 minutes, it happened at a bad time. If it had happened 4 months ago, this might not be a huge deal. But we're in that window right now where engagement's high, and it can really affect, I think, poll numbers for the rest of the week, and maybe until we see what happens at the first debate.
Okay, Scott, thanks very much for being with us. Believe it or not, voting is already underway, and you'll never get